Hello, hello, hello. It's not where we start, ladies and gentlemen. It's where we finish. I'm Anthony Gaffa, and you're watching Unfiltered with Gafa. Last episode, we ticked off getting that money together, saving for your deposit, engaging the right bank, engaging a broker. This week, we're going to jump straight into it. Just like my advice to you, don't around. Don't wait for the right moment. Don't wait for the properties to drop in value. Jump in, get your hands on whatever real estate you can afford, understand your borrowing capacity, get down and get that property before it's actually genuinely out of your reach. So many people wait for the right moment. They've got the deposit plus $20,000 in the bank or plus 10% extra. My advice is jump in when you've got enough for that deposit. You'll make ends meet. You're not going to lose a property if you're $2,000 or $3,000 short. If you realize, well, the rent I'm going to receive on that property is not going to quite cover that mortgage like you thought. Get a second job like we spoke about. Work extra. Beg, borrow, steal. Do whatever you need to do to save that property. And look, when I say steal, I don't really mean get out there and hold up a bank. It's just a term. I did get some feedback around that. I don't really mean go down to the local shops and attack their till. That being said, I've made it clear. Jump into the market. You're not going to go wrong. And when I say that, that's assuming you've done your research, you know where to buy. You've spoken to potential buyer's agents or property experts, or you've done your own research. And I'm not saying just get on ChatGPT and find out where the best place to buy is. I'm saying real research, real market research, where the supply and demand is in your favor. A desirable place for people to live is where you want to buy, where the occupancy rate is really high, so there's no vacancies in that area, where people are paying rent because they can't afford to buy. That makes sense to me. Where people are paying rent because they have disposable income. That makes sense to me. So what is right for you? Where to buy? Because we know the timing is now. So I'm not going to say when. The timing is now. The minute you've got that deposit, that's when the timing is right. Don't worry about that extra $1,000 or $2,000 that you're short of or that you've only got left over. You know, after buying a property, you're only going to have $1,000 in the bank. That's not important because the value of your property is going to go up if you play your cards right. Your rental income is going to go up. That's all we've ever seen. And I'm pretty sure the minute you buy a property, you're not going to quit your job. Okay, if you get the sack, what do? Well, you just go and stack shelves at night. Okay, you're not getting that pay rise you thought you were going to get. Do your calculations up front. Make sure when you are getting into the market, you are making the right decision. I've never heard of too many people buying their first property and have to offload because property values have gone down or they've lost their job or they just can't afford to keep it. Because like I mentioned, the property goes up, the rents go up. I'm sure you're going to advance in your career. If you're that astute and you're buying real estate, your career is probably going to go side by side with that. The only time you may have to offload a property is because you've got 3 or 4 and you want to make property your full-time gig, which isn't a bad way to go. One thing at a time. We've now got our deposit. and you're on the market to buy a property, do you go through a buyer's agent or do you buy yourself? Do you go out on that path and start that journey all by yourself? Hey, Anthony, how important is it to buy a property in my local area? I want to be able to go check it out. I want to show my friends and my family this property that I bought. Or I know the region I live in does quite well. There's a track record of the region I'm living in doing well. I'm just going to invest there. It's now a numbers game. Don't get emotionally attached. Don't invest with your heart. Invest with your mind. Be strategic. I do say just jump in, but I'm not saying to be an idiot. Not once have I said make a foolish decision. So, jumping straight in with a calculated decision that backs it up with research is definitely the way you need to go moving forward. Do some research, understand the area. The biggest problem people have, they jump from region to region to region. Now, in Australia, property typically grows in value 5 to 7%, sometimes more year on year. Find the right area. Not an area or a region that's just had a mine that's going to go ahead, or, they're talking about releasing some transport in the next 20 years and all of a sudden there's an influx. Although an upgrade of transport to a certain region is desirable, just be careful it's not a short-term play. You don't want to get caught out buying in a country town where there's a project, whether it's a mine or whatever it is. There's 1,000 houses that have been constructed. They're all occupied. They're all paying 40, 50% over rent valuations. But then the project comes to an end. What happens? Everybody moves out. Now there's a surplus of homes. There's too many homes in that country town. What does that do to your rent? Not just an area that has done well overnight or for the last couple of years. Because you don't want to get caught out on the back of a rise, then all of a sudden your investment has gone downhill and you can't get a tenant. So very important to do your research. I don't want to keep harping on about it, but buying your first property is so important because you want to be able to go to the bank and say, 12 months later, 2 years in, I've purchased a property for X amount and it's now worth 15, 20% more. You do your little improvement and now it's worth another 10% more. So selecting that property in the right area is really important. But where I'm leading to here is jumping in. But you can't jump in unless you know where you're going. Let's eliminate the regions you don't want to buy in. Narrow it down to a state. Then select the regions that you can afford in. On the back of understanding what you can afford, your budget, because you've got that finance approved now, select suburbs. Pick out 3 or 4 suburbs, maybe a few more. Depending on your budget, you can then narrow your search down and stop wasting time. There's so many people I've spoken to who have penciled in an area, mark my word, penciled in, and they've been looking for the last 2 years. Whereas if you can narrow that down to 1 or 2 suburbs, really hone in on those areas, you'll know the value of properties in that area. You'll be ready to pounce. You'll be ready to lay down your deposit as soon as the right property comes up in that area. Things to consider. What is going to make my property worth more money? I'm getting in at the right time. Are there subdivisions happening in the area? Is there a train station? Is there new schools? Is there a shopping centre? Are there more parks? These are the things investors like to hear or like to see in a particular area. Take these things into consideration, but be very, very cautious on you're buying a property with a minimum budget, so don't get too caught up. tick off as many boxes as you can, but jumping into that property market sooner rather than later is the key. For me personally, when did I start making sure that I had to tick all the boxes? Is there a train station coming by? Is there a hospital nearby? A company such as a Woolworths moving in? What is happening in the area? Do my research. That came in the next phase of my investment. The first phase is, above all, pick out an area that's going to work, and just jump in. You're not going to do poorly if you select in the right region. Within 12 months, if you play your cards right, you can buy another property. Some of these things you may not have in your bucket list because you may not be able to afford it. So compromise. Know what you can compromise on and know what you can't compromise on. Select that area, go to work, do your research. Given you've committed the last couple of years in saving your deposit, it's time for you to start doing the research. Depending on what you do, now comes into play. But given you've done 2 years of the hard yards, made those sacrifices that we crossed off earlier, you need to get your head around buying a property. You need to understand the area. It's not something you can just outsource, especially if you're considering making property your full-time career. Now, you've identified the area you want to buy, not live in. We've crossed off rent vesting. So, buying and living are two separate things. You don't need to purchase a property in the area you went to school in. That is not the most important thing. You need to purchase a property in not just an established area, but an area that does well, that performs year on year. When I say year on year and performs well, not just in growth, you need to know that for the last couple of years, because things change, that the occupancy rate is really high. You don't want to go to an area where every second house is for rent because you have to compete on price then. You want to maintain your rental returns. You want them to go up annually. You don't want to compete against every other property that's vacant on the market. That's a nightmare. So you've now identified where you want to buy. It's not with your heart, it's with your mind. You're buying in an area that you've done research in. And now my advice is just jump in. Don't waste no more time. You've identified all the important points. Start going to auctions. Start talking to local real estates. Let them know you're serious. Let them know that your finance is approved. Let them know they need to call you. You don't need to get finance. You're not going to waste their time. Call me first. Stay on their back. Okay, you've now been looking for 2 or 3 months and you've realized there's opportunities at work to pick up some overtime, or it's costing you money because you're not working weekends anymore. Jumping in is crucial. Getting into that market as soon as you've got that deposit ready is the most important part. You may need to consider engaging a buyer's agent. Buyer's agents are experts within their field. They know how to negotiate. They know how to select the right property for you. It costs money. But engaging an expert in any field costs money. So having a buyer's agent might mean outlaying a few dollars to get into the market to ensure you don't miss out on an opportunity and the next property rise. Properties go up in value in Australia, especially month by month, especially in the right area. So by going to work, earning money, engaging a buyer's agent is something you definitely need to consider to tick off that box, getting into the market as soon as you can. The most crucial part in buying a property is stop around, make a decision, select an area, go to the auctions, buy that property yourself, put your hand up, Or if you haven't got the balls, engage a buyer's agent, especially for your first one. And keep it simple. How do you identify the right place and the wrong place? How do you identify the right buyer's agent and the wrong buyer's agent? You're not in a position to buy a house and land package. You're not in a position to buy something off the plan. You're not in a position to engage a buyer's agent whose pockets are being lined by a developer. And how do you get this information? There's so many podcasts out there now, so many buyer's agents who offer you free advice. Real estate agents can assist. Reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about it. I love talking property. I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I am passionate about it. Now, when it comes to identifying what property is suited to you, I did make a really solid point on saying just jump in and buy something. It is important not to buy the wrong property because you don't want to have a bad experience first time around. What do I strongly advise not to buy? Like I said earlier, do not buy off the plans. Do not buy new stock. Buy in an established area. And when someone offers you some land and you can build yourself, tell them to get stuffed. You are not in a position to buy land and construct a new home for your first property. You want to focus either on living there and getting the first home buyer's grant, or buying a property, capitalizing on the income on the rent, waive the first home buyer's grant goodbye, and rent that out so you can get into the market sooner because you're going to declare the income. But Anthony, there's more money in it if I buy land and build a house. Don't worry about the extra couple of dollars the government's throwing at you. That's there for all the wrong reasons when you're a first home buyer. You need to focus on what's going to grow in value, and you can either live in it because of the incentives straight away, or you need to just jump on a property that's going to give you a good return, not the extra couple of bucks for you to develop a property. You're not a developer, so get your mind out of that idea. You're not ready for that yet. For me personally, even though I don't want to buy vacant land and build a new property on it, if I have the option to buy an apartment or a property with land and an existing dwelling on it that I could potentially add a granny flat, that's what I would go for. The growth could be quite significant, and over and above the growth, you can put a granny flat out the back and get a second income. And it's quite easy to upgrade, to lay down some new carpet, give it a lick of paint, and put the rent up by 10 or 20%. You can even knock up that granny flat, going through a private certifier, get it built within 10 weeks. Right from the beginning to the end, you could have it done in less than 4 months. So why wouldn't you consider buying a established house in an area that's got a proven track record of growth every year? The supply and demand is in your favor. There's not too many vacancies, so you'll always get a tenant. Whether it's in an area where there's a lot of disposable income, or whether it's in an area that's a desirable place to live. And for me personally, I remember buying my first property. It was a property that I knocked up a granny flat in. And this is a long time ago. I don't know if I was the first person in the world doing granny flats. That's how old I am, but it was actually a very long time ago. And I remember I paid, I'll declare it, I paid $115,000 for this house. It was actually in Blacktown. I didn't have one person tell me, "Oh, goodbye, you bought well." Everybody said to me, "You paid $5,000 too much, $7,000 too much. You could have got it cheaper." But I just went in. I didn't have the finance organised, to be honest. I didn't know what lender's mortgage insurance was, and they had it back then, and I had to pay it. But I nearly had enough money, and I just figured by the time it settled, that was 6 weeks. I did read somewhere I could extend that settlement to 8 weeks if I need to. And as an apprentice electrician, I knew if I needed to work every Saturday and Sunday and do a couple of private jobs on the side and sell my dirt bike, I would have had enough money to cover that deposit back then. And back then you needed a lender's mortgage insurance on a 10% deposit. So when I talk about working, begging, borrowing, and stealing, that's what I mean. I squeezed everything out of what I had. I sold my dirt bike. I sold everything I had. Not everything, but a lot of things I had. I actually had to delay the settlement date so I could round up a few more bucks. But I managed to get that property, and I paid $115,000 for a house on John Street in Blacktown. That house now is worth $1.2 million. Now, 6 months in, I rounded up enough money and I built a granny flat out the back. Back then, you could just convert the garage. So I converted the garage into a granny flat. I don't even think they were called granny flats back then. This is a long time ago. Of course, if it was $115,000, you can see how long ago it was. But everybody was saying to me, you're such a fool for paying lender's mortgage insurance. Most people were saying, mate, you could have got that for $2,000 or $3,000 cheaper. Why did you pay full price? Well, there was a method behind my madness. I was very young. The agent didn't give me the time of day. He didn't want to do business with me. There were a lot of other people who wanted to buy the property. So they couldn't get out of the deal and they had to accept my offer. I paid full price. They had to sign. I signed, but now I just needed to round up the remainder of that deposit. So I managed to get into the property. I lost $1,000 because I probably could have negotiated down $1,000 or $2,000. I didn't do enough research to know what mortgage insurance was, lender's mortgage insurance was back in those days. And I didn't get the best deal from a bank because I still didn't have finance ready. But buying that property back 30 years ago, fuck, now I'm showing my age. Buying that property 30 years ago meant I'd made my first step. And that property was growing in value. I remember collecting the rent from the house physically myself because I didn't want to pay an agent the percentage to go getting the rent from the tenant. So I used to go and get the rent myself. But then I realized it wasn't smart to collect the rent myself. I then realized there was a granny flat potentially at the back. There was a double garage. I converted that double garage into a granny flat. I paid that house off in less than 3 years. I then went on to my next one and my next one. So why wouldn't you make that sacrifice, jump into the market just like I did, make your first move and capitalize on Australian real estate? Stop wasting time. Get near enough. Make some offers on property and jump in, because the longer you wait, the harder it's going to get. Stop ticking all the boxes. Make a decision. Buy a property. There'll be no turning back. Follow me on I am Anthony Gafa on all my socials, and my podcast can be viewed on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and all leading podcast platforms.